Hi everyone, I'm back with a mouse called Wolf. It's time for our last chapter. We're going to find out how the story ends in chapter 11, a recital. When Mrs. Honeybee did come home, she was on crutches and a nurse was with her. The first thing Mrs. Honeybee thought about was her mouse, but she didn't say anything to the nurse. She had realized that in the hospital she had babbled on a bit about her singing mouse. They had probably thought she was senile. But now that she was back home, she knew that she wanted the matter kept secret. If it got out that she had the world's first singing mouse beneath her roof, the publicity would be overwhelming, and she would never again have a moment's peace. The first thing she did was to go to her grand piano and, leaning one crutch against the wall and balancing with the other, tap out with one finger, "There's no place like home." "You'll have a tough time playing, dear," said the nurse, "with that foot in a cast." "I'll just have to manage with one pedal for the time being," said Mrs. Honeybee. "Well, I'll tell you one thing you won't be able to manage," said the nurse, "and that's the stairs. We'll have to make you up a bed downstairs. Where shall it be? In your den?" "No, here, please," said Mrs. Honeybee. "Here in the living room, right next to my beloved piano." And very near my beloved mouse, she thought. "There's a sort of day bed," she said, "that I use out in the garden. You'll find it in the conservatory at the back of the house. I'll be with you in half a minute." And when the nurse had left the room, she hopped across to the candy tin. She opened a fresh packet of chocolates, then put not one, but two on the piano stool before following the nurse. When they came back to make up the bed, the chocolates, Mrs. Honeybee saw immediately, were gone. "Look, Mommy," Wolf had said, "one each." "Thank goodness!" Mary had cried, and she had begun to gobble her chocolate like a crazy thing. Once she was sure that Mrs. Honeybee had everything she wanted, the nurse left, saying that she would be back the next morning. As soon as she was gone, Mrs. Honeybee put out another double ration of candy, on the piano top this time, and sat on the stool and waited. In the mouse hole, Mary said, "She's put out some more. I can smell it. Come on, Wolf." "Okay, Mommy," said Wolf. And together they came out and ran up the leg of the piano and onto the top. "One each again," squeaked Mary, and she attacked her chocolate eagerly. Wolf did not touch his. Instead, he sat above Middle C, above Steinway and Sons, and gazed fondly at Mrs. Honeybee's face, while she gazed back fondly. "Oh, how glad I am to see you again," each thought. Mary thought the same, but she was referring to the chocolate candy. "Should I sing to her?" wondered Wolf. "Should I sing her my very own composition now?" But then something told him, no, this is not the moment. I want her to hear it first when we're alone together. Mommy might interrupt. And anyway, she's making a lot of noise gobbling chocolate. I'll wait for the right time. "Tomorrow," said Mrs. Honeybee, "we'll have some music, okay, Mouse? Just now, I'm going to bed. I'm a bit tired." However, that night she could not get to sleep. It was so odd to be in bed in the living room beside the grand piano. But then, maybe by chance, or maybe because he sensed that this was what a cradle song was designed to do, Wolf began to sing, very softly, the Chopin lullaby. In a matter of minutes, Mrs. Honeybee fell asleep. In the days that followed, Wolf sometimes accompanied, sometimes not, sang all the songs that he'd learned, including a new one, for the weather was still fine and Mrs. Honeybee had at last taught him, oh, what a beautiful morning. But very often at night, when she was fast asleep in the living room, Wolf ran upstairs to practice and perfect his own composition in her bedroom. Meanwhile, Mrs. Honeybee progressed from crutches to canes, and from 2 canes to 1, and then she went back to the hospital to have the cast removed and to be told that her ankle had healed beautifully. She came home walking without a cane at all, and that night she climbed the stairs to sleep in her own room. She had said goodnight to the mice and had given them 1 chocolate each. She didn't have the heart to go back to the old ration of 1 between the 2 of them. Mary didn't mind. She ate hers and what Wolf couldn't manage. Mrs. Honeybee lay in bed, remembering her fall and how painful it had been and how the nice policeman had come climbing through the window. It was open now, the curtains drawn back so that the street light outside filled the room with a soft glow. "How did the man know I was in trouble?" she said. "I can't really recall what happened, but I thought my mouse was singing. No, I must have imagined all that." And then she heard a little rustling sound, which was Wolf scrambling up the curtains. And there he was, her singing mouse, sitting on the windowsill facing her. He stood up on his hind legs for a moment and dropped his head slightly, almost as though he were bowing to her, she thought. Then he began to sing Swallow Sonata. Mrs. Honeybee lay spellbound. "I never taught him this," she thought. "I've never heard this piece of music before. Never in all my concert playing days did I hear this. And yet it must be by one of the great classical composers. How light it is, how airy, how sheerly joyful. But how can my mouse know it? All he has learned from me. There can only be one explanation. He has composed it. It is his very own opus." Then, with a final reprise of its principal swooping, twisting, darting bird theme, the song ended, and Wolf sat silent on the sill. "Oh, Mouse," cried Mrs. Honeybee, clapping her hands. "What a piece of work this is! You must teach it to me, Mouse. Tomorrow you must sing it through to me again and again, and I will somehow force my rheumatic old fingers to play all those lovely lilting notes. Why, Mozart could not have composed anything more entrancing, Mouse. Which gives me a sudden idea, a brilliant idea, if I say so myself, for a name to call you, instead of always saying Mouse. Mozart, you see, was not only the greatest of musicians, he was also the most precocious. He began to compose at a very early age, just like you. So why don't I call you by his name?" Wolf listened to the lady, without, of course, understanding a word that she said. She was pleased, though, he felt sure. She approved of his Swallow Sonata, and he felt glad and proud. He saw her get out of bed and approach the window and stretch out an arm toward him slowly. Then, with one finger, Mrs. Honeybee very gently stroked him on the top of his sleek brown head. "Mozart's name," she said, "was Wolfgang Amadeus. So that is what I am going to call you from now on. No, wait a bit. That's too much of a mouthful, I think. Why don't I just call you Wolf?" She smiled happily to herself. "You really are a ridiculous old woman, Jane Honeybee," she said. "Who but you would think of something so unlikely as a mouse called Wolf?" And that's the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it.